The story begins with a 20-year-old boy, Will Hunting. He lives in a very poor neighborhood, but works at the world's most famous university, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It sounds very good, but the reality is that Will doesn't study there. He just cleans the university buildings. One day, while he is cleaning the hallway, he notices a very difficult mathematics problem written on a blackboard. The problem was posted by Professor Gerald Lambeau. He had challenged the entire college that whoever solved this problem would have their name published in the university books and would gain both fame and respect. Will looks intently at the problem, and his mind gets stuck on it. All day, he keeps thinking about the same question. Even when he's at the bar with his friends, his mind is tangled up in that problem. Suddenly, he leaves his friends and goes straight to his small, old house to sit up all night and solve the question. He doesn't have a blackboard at home, so he writes the solution on the bathroom mirror, trying and erasing mistakes. After many hours, he finally solves the problem. A few days later, when he goes to work, he writes the correct solution on the board while cleaning. When Professor Lambeau sees the solution written on the board, he is astonished. He cannot believe that any of his students solved such a difficult problem so quickly. He becomes desperate to know who this genius is. That evening, Will is hanging out with his friends. They meet some people on the way. One of the boys makes fun of a girl. Will recognizes the boy. This was the same person who used to trouble him a lot in his childhood. In anger, Will asks his friend to stop the car and, without thinking, gets out and immediately attacks him. Will punches him, and a fight breaks out between the two groups. A little while later, the police arrive. Will's friends try to save him and pull him away, but it is too late. The police arrest Will. The next morning, Professor Lambeau gives a lecture to his students. Everyone's eyes are on him because they all want to know who solved such a difficult problem. But no one in the class answers. The professor is a little disappointed and says that if someone has solved the previous problem, he will now give them an even harder problem. He explains that this is the same problem he and his colleagues have been working on for the past 2 years, and now that question is written on the board. Meanwhile, Will walks out of the police station and tells his friends that his court date is next week. In the evening, he goes to his job and sees an easy question written on the board again. He quickly starts solving it so no one sees him. Just then, Professor Lambeau comes out of his office and sees Will writing on the board. He angrily asks, "What are you doing here?" Will immediately apologizes and steps back. The professor thinks this boy is a delinquent who is just writing on the board unnecessarily. He tries to grab him, but Will swiftly disappears from there. When the professor looks at the board again, he realizes that the correct answer is written there. Seeing this, he is stunned. After finishing work in the evening, Will goes to the bar with his friends and tells them that he has been fired from his job. Now he won't be able to come inside the university and solve questions. His friends ask why he was fired. Will jokes, "The management just made some changes." The next day, Professor Lambeau is determined to find this mysterious genius. He goes straight to the janitor's office and asks for the name of a boy who works there. But the staff there think the professor has come to complain about the cleaning, so they don't immediately give Will's name. A little later, it is revealed that Will was not doing the cleaning job at MIT voluntarily, but it was community service ordered by the court. Now the day had come for his case to be heard. Professor Lambeau is also present in court. Everyone sees Will defending his own case. He shows such knowledge about law and society that everyone is surprised. But he has many old cases against him. Therefore, the judge sends him to jail and sets his bail at $50,000. Sometime later, Professor Lambeau comes to meet Will in jail. He tells him that the judge has given permission for him to be released from jail, but with two conditions. First, Will has to study with the professor every week. Second, he has to meet a psychologist every week so that his anger and criminal habits can be reduced. Will thinks he doesn't need a psychologist, but he accepts the condition to be free. After leaving jail, he starts studying with the professor and easily solves even the most difficult problems. The professor is very impressed with his ability. But the therapy is not so easy. The professor calls in many different doctors, but none of them can handle Will. The first doctor is even scared because Will makes fun of the book he wrote. The second psychologist tries a different approach to handle Will. He tries to put him to sleep by hypnotizing him, but this method also doesn't work. Seeing this, Professor Lambeau almost gives up. Then, he remembers his old college friend, Sean McGuire, who is now a psychologist. The professor goes to Sean's office, explains Will's case, and invites him to discuss it at a restaurant. Sean first refuses because his schedule is very busy, but Professor Lambeau explains to him that Will is no ordinary boy, but a genius of a different level. He compares him to the famous mathematical scholar who made great discoveries without any formal education. Hearing this, Sean finally agrees to meet Will. In the first session, Will, as always, tries to annoy the doctor with rudeness and jokes. He even makes fun of a painting Sean made and says it's completely useless. Sean doesn't get angry at this and remains calm. But when Will makes fun of his personal life and his wife, Sean completely flares up. He says in a firm tone, "If you ever mention my wife's name again, I will destroy you." And with that, ends the session. Later, when Professor Lambeau sees that Sean is upset, he tells him that he can quit the case if he wants, but Sean clearly says that he will definitely meet Will again next week. After the first session, Sean keeps thinking about Will's words, especially when he mentioned his wife. These memories make him feel lonely. Meanwhile, Will progresses a little in his life. He goes on a date with Skylar, the girl he met at the bar. Skylar tells him that she inherited a lot of money from her father and is thinking of getting admission to Stanford University. They have a very good evening, and they finally kiss in a diner. Now comes the second therapy session. This time, Sean takes Will not to his office, but to a park bench. As soon as Will starts his usual joking and taunting, Sean stops him. Sean says that he has thought a lot about Will's words and now has something to say. He explains that even though Will is very educated and sharp-witted, he knows nothing about real life. He might know about every artist in the world from books, but he has never left Boston to see their real artwork. He can recite books about war, but he has never seen a battlefield. He can recite poems about love, but he has never truly loved a woman or completely opened himself up to her. And most importantly, until Will tells his own heart's pain, no one can understand the pain of being an orphan. Sean says that all this cannot be learned from books. Life itself teaches the real lessons. In the next session, Will remains silent the whole time, sitting quietly, because he knows Will is just testing him, and he turns out to be right. In the very next session, Will breaks the silence and tells Sean a dirty joke. After this, they start having light conversation. Will talks about his date. Sean asks if he will meet Skylar again. Then Will admits a truth. He says maybe not, because he doesn't want the perfect image he has of Skylar in his eyes to be broken. But Sean explains to him that Will is actually afraid of his own perfect image, not the girl's. In real relationships, one has to accept each other's flaws and habits. Sean tells the story of his wife, who recently passed away due to cancer. He says that he misses her small habits and tantrums the most. True love and intimacy happen only when we accept a person with their flaws. For the first time, Will listens carefully. On the other side, Will goes to meet Skylar at her hostel. Skylar is surprised because Will hadn't called her for a long time, but she agrees to go out. The next day, they go to see a dog race and have a very good time. Skylar asks Will where he grew up. Will hides the truth and jokes that he has 12 older brothers. Skylar laughs and says it's a lie, but Will makes the conversation more fun by swearing it's true. He even has to promise that he will introduce Skylar to his family soon. After this, Skylar asks Will how one knows if someone is their true partner. This question sticks in Will's mind, and the next day he asks Sean the same thing. Sean smiles and says that he knew at first sight when he saw his wife. Then he tells a story. Once he got tickets to a very rare baseball game, but he missed the game because he met a beautiful girl at the bar that same day. Sean says he still has no regrets about missing that game. Skylar keeps insisting that Will introduce her to his real family, but Will still avoids telling the truth. So, he decides to introduce her to his friends at least. Skylar easily mixes with their group. She laughs and jokes with everyone and drinks beer, but at the end of the night, Will's mood is spoiled by something Chuck says. On the other side, Professor Lambeau meets Sean at a diner and asks questions about Will's therapy. Lambeau is not really concerned about Will's past, but wants to know what Will is going to do next under his guidance. Sean says that he will not pressure Will because Will has to decide what he wants in life. Hearing this, Lambeau gets angry and says that he has already introduced Will to very important people. But they don't know that Will's friend Chuck went to meet those people instead of Will. There, Chuck demands money and spoils the whole deal with his bad behavior. On the other side, Will and Skylar spend a romantic evening, and their relationship starts getting deeper. Skylar asks Will a direct question at her house. She says that she has to go to California to study at Stanford and wants Will to go with her. But Will immediately refuses and starts making all kinds of excuses. Skylar explains to him that he is just stuck in his small world where he doesn't face any challenges and is afraid of new things. Hearing this, Will flares up. He thinks that Skylar is just making fun of him, and he is just a time pass for her because he is poor. Skylar is surprised and asks why he is so stressed about money. Crying, she says that if she had to choose between her rich father's wealth and her father, she would always choose her father, not the money. Skylar clearly says that she is also scared, but at least she is honest with Will. Will argues again. Then Skylar remembers that Will had repeatedly told the false story of his 12 brothers. Now Will completely loses his temper and starts shouting. He says that Skylar would never want to know his real life because the truth is that he is an orphan and people treated him very badly in his childhood. Skylar, with tears in her eyes, assures him that she wants to know everything about him, no matter how painful it is. Finally, Skylar tells him what's in her heart. She loves him, but Will's heart is already closed, and he says in a cold voice, "I don't love you." After this, Will meets Professor Lambeau. Lambeau is angry because Will's actions messed everything up in the meeting with the business partners. Will bursts out in anger and says that he is not even sure if he really wants this academic career or not. Now the conversation between Will and Professor Lambeau becomes even more difficult because Will's sharp-witted remarks put Lambeau down. Lambeau says that he expected at least some gratitude from Will. They argue, and Will leaves in anger. Sometime later, Will is called for a job interview at the National Security Agency, NSA, where he is promised a golden career, but Will flatly refuses. He says that he does not want to ruin the life of any ordinary person just for political moves. After this, Will meets Sean again. Sean asks why he turned down the NSA job. Will laughs and says, "I'm waiting for a better opportunity." Sean, his psychologist, asks Will if he has any friends he can talk to about his heart's desires, or if he ever feels lonely. Instead of answering, Will starts listing the names of famous philosophers. Then Sean explains that real relationships can only be made with living people. Sean then asks what Will really wants, if he is serious about his future. Will jokes that he has no problem being a bricklayer or a cowboy. Sean understands that Will is just joking and running away from his truth. In anger, Sean throws him out of his office. Will is surprised why he was thrown out. Then Sean clearly says, "Because you are not answering honestly, just hiding your real identity." While talking, Will asks Sean, "You talk about your life partner, but where is your wife?" Sean calmly replies, "She is no longer in this world." Time passes, and Will calls Skylar. But Skylar has stopped waiting for him because Will never makes a firm decision. Skylar says, "I love you. Take care," for the last time, and then she leaves for California. On the other side, Will starts working construction with his friend Chuck in Boston. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau says on the phone that Will is not fulfilling his responsibility anymore. If he reports to the court that Will is not attending the sessions, Will go back to jail. And this time, his conscience will be clear too. During a break at work, Chuck asks Will what he is going to do next in life. Will jokes that he doesn't want to be a rat in a lab solving math problems, but wants to stay in Boston and have fun with his friends. But this time, Chuck openly scolds Will. He says that Will is wasting his potential. Chuck even admits that every day he wishes that one day Will would leave his house and create his real life. Meanwhile, Lambeau finds out that Will is no longer going to therapy with Sean either. In anger, Lambeau threatens Sean that he will tell the judge the truth and accuses Sean of pushing Will back towards crime. Sean tells Professor Lambeau that he doesn't care if people laugh at him, but he cannot ignore Will's feelings. Sean reveals that Lambeau never accepted true love and has been alone all his life. But Lambeau is not ready to listen to him. He thinks that Sean is jealous of his success. Hearing this, Sean is surprised and feels that Lambeau is just arrogant. Sean explains that he only cares about Will's future and his true desires, whereas Lambeau's pressure can make him unsuccessful. Just then, Lambeau quietly leaves the place and leaves Will alone with Sean. Sean tells Will that his fight with Lambeau is not personal, but related to old issues. Then, Sean changes the topic and says that he has prepared a report for the judge about Will. Will asks him if he has had any other patients like him. Then Sean shares his personal life for the first time and reveals that his father was an alcoholic who used to beat him a lot. He tells Will that what happened to him is not his fault. Initially, Will tries to avoid the conversation by making a joke, but then suddenly breaks down and reveals his true emotions. Finally, everything becomes clear. His father was an alcoholic and used to beat him a lot in his childhood. Will comes to Sean for his last session and tells him that he has decided to join a job at one of the companies suggested by Professor Lambeau, and he is happy with this decision. Sean also says that he has thought of traveling the world a little and gives his number to Will as he leaves. In the evening, Will celebrates his birthday with his friends. His friends gift him a car that they built from old parts. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau comes to meet Sean. Both apologize to each other and then go out for a drink at a bar together. On the other side, Chuck comes to pick up Will as usual. But this time, he sees that Will is not at home. Seeing this, Chuck is very happy, just as he always wished in his dreams. Will has left a note for Sean. Sean reads it and finds out that Will has quit the job and gone to California to be with Skylar. In that note, Will writes the same line that Sean once said to his friends when he decided to meet his future wife instead of the baseball game. And in this beautiful way, the story ends. This story teaches us that true victory in life is not achieved with a degree or a job, but by true love and recognizing one's true purpose.